Good morning, Rutherford County. My name is Greg Sutherland. This is my wife, Susanna, and we're excited to be here with the Word of Faith Fellowship to share with you what God has been doing with us and teaching us and working in our hearts. Because when you have something to share, you want to share it with everybody. It's like when Peter and John went to the temple and the lame man was wanting money, and they looked at him and they said, what we have, we give you. We don't have money, but we'll give you what we have. And that's why we're here this morning. We want to give you what Jesus has been speaking to us because it's changed our lives, and we believe it'll change your lives too. So this morning, Susanna and I have been talking recently, and we began to realize our choices really do define who we are. Our choices for good or our choices for bad. We make so many choices every single day. We were talking about that this morning, with where we get up in the morning, we decide whether we're going to get up in the morning or not, or what time we're going to get up and what we're going to put on and what we're going to do and what breakfast we're going to have. We make thousands of decisions every single day. But do we really consider Jesus in those decisions? A lot of times we don't. There's many mornings I'll get up and I'll inquire Jesus. I'll ask him, Jesus, what do I need to wear today? Because Jesus knows what my day's going to be like. I don't. I have an idea. I have an outline of what I think is going to happen, but I really don't know. And if I ask Jesus, he'll tell me what to wear. And most of the time I'll get to work and I'll know whether I heard from God or not, because it'll be real evident. The fruit will be there. Either I heard and maybe I was going to work in the warehouse that day and get dirty, and so I wore the right clothes, or maybe I didn't hear and wore clothes that I didn't need to get dirty. So it's just things like that. And it's the simple decisions that really affect us. I can look back on my life and I can go back to second grade, and that's been almost 50 years ago. And I can think about one simple decision I made one day on the playground playing with a friend, and that decision affected me for 30 or 40 years after that, and I didn't realize it, but it was just a simple decision, a simple word out of my mouth, and it did damage in my life. And when I realized it years later, I'd let God go back into my heart and uproot that choice that I made so that he could change me and make me what I wanted to be. Because truthfully, every little decision we make sets on course our life. And we were talking a lot about that this morning, and Susanna was sharing with me some scriptures that she had on what God has to say about our choices. So,
Yes. And in Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, God said, I call heaven and earth to witness this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, the blessings and the curses. Therefore choose life, that you and your descendants may live. God tells us in that verse to choose life. He tells us the choice to make. He wants us to choose life. That choice brings his blessings on us. And if we don't, then we're going to receive his curses. Every day we have that choice to choose life, to choose his blessings in everything that we do. And that's what he wants us to do. He's on our side. He wants us to make it. He wants us to make the right choice in everything that we do, every situation, every little thought we have. He wants us to make it. He wants us to choose life in his way.
and we really don't know what the future holds for any of us. We don't know from moment to moment. We don't know in the next moment if we're going to be alive or not. We don't know when Jesus is coming back. We don't know what's going to happen driving down the road. And then, I remember going back to school, if you had somebody standing there with you when you're taking a test that was telling you the answer to each question, that would make it really simple, wouldn't it? And really, that's what God's doing here. He's saying, I'm putting before you the choice, life or death. But then he takes it a step farther and he says, choose life. He tells us the right choice. And you would think, well, it's real obvious, but how many times a day do we not choose life? Do we make the wrong decision? A coworker, a friend, a husband, a wife, a child comes up to us and says something, and we make that choice to get mad about it, or we make that choice to be depressed about it, or whatever. We make that wrong choice. When God all the time is standing there telling us which choice to make, he really does know the beginning from the end. He knows what our next moments are going to be. He knows what we're going to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We don't need to know that. We just need to know, what are we doing right here, right now? When we were preparing for this, we were talking a lot about, we were thinking about all the scriptures where it talks about the examples of right choices and wrong choices. But still, it came down to, Jesus, what verses do you want us to share today? Not what I want, not what I think flows, not what matches an outline, but what is the voice of God today? Because what I say is not going to change you. What Susanna says is not going to change you. What's going to change you is the voice of God coming to us, coming through us, and you hearing that voice of God. God is speaking to us today, to you, to me, so that we can make the right choices, so that we can have a good life. God talks about in the New Testament, he talks about choosing those happy paths. And he does truly have a happy path for every single one of us. He foreordained us. He predestined us. He knew us before we were born. He knows what plans he has for us. And it says in Jeremiah that he says, I know the thoughts and the plans that I do have for you. And they're thoughts and plans for welfare and peace, not for evil, to give you hope in your final outcome. God has a good plan for you today. God has a good plan for me today. I don't know what all it means. I'm still saying, Jesus, what do you want me to do today? And as I watch it unfold in my life, it's going to be good for me as long as I stay on that path and make those right choices to just simply do what God tells me to do. We're trained growing up, unfortunately, in our school system to make those choices ourselves, to decide what's best for us and to follow those paths. And I don't know about you, but many times I've made those wrong choices. We've made wrong choices. We go down those paths and we end up in destruction. And Jesus says in Proverbs, he said, there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end of it is destruction. And we've all been down those paths. We've all seen those outcomes, and we all think back, I wish I hadn't made that choice. If I just made the opposite choice, it wouldn't be this way. There's only one person that can change that, and that's God. When you've realized you've gone down those paths of destruction, the only thing that you can do is you can be destroyed, or you can turn to God and say, God, I made the wrong choice. Please forgive me. I realize I did not listen to your voice. Please forgive me. Please make it right. Please redeem my life. And he will. But it's making that choice. You realize you made the wrong choice. Now it's making the choice to let God make it right in your life. Everything's a choice. If you look in Genesis chapter 12, one of the best examples, I believe, is Abraham. And he lived in a pagan, heathen town called Ur of the Chaldees, full of false gods. But yet it says in Genesis 12, now in Haran, the Lord, the one true God, said to Abram, go for yourself, for your own advantage, away from your country, from your relatives and your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you with abundant increase of favors, and make your name famous and distinguished, and you will be a blessing, dispensing good to others. Now that's a good promise, but you got to realize Abraham didn't have a pastor teaching him that. He didn't have somebody there with him teaching that. Abraham lived in a heathen city, all these false gods around him. He grew up with false gods, and yet Abraham heard God's voice. He heard God's voice come to him that day. And in Hebrews chapter 11, a lot of people call this the chapter of faith, the heroes of faith. But it talks about Abraham and that decision that he made, and really it puts it in a really good way that it applies to all of us. And it says here in verse 8 that urged on by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed. And that's a key. When that choice comes to you, when you're faced with that choice and you turn to God and you say, God, what do I do? What choice do I make? It says, obey. And many times if you sit there and you think about it and you give yourself time to reason it over and, well, should I or shouldn't I? You will reason away the voice of God coming to you and you make your own decision. Exactly. But what I've learned is when that voice comes to me, obey quickly. Obey right then. And that's what Abraham did. It says when he was called, he obeyed. And he went forth to a place which he was destined to receive. as an inheritance. And as he went, and this is key right here, although he did not know or trouble his mind about where he was to go. That's key right there. Because a lot of times when those decisions come to us, we're sitting there thinking, okay, well, if I make this decision, it's going to be this way, this is going to happen, this is not going to happen. But that's where faith comes in. That you believe you've heard the voice of God. And you stand on that despite what it looks like. Because many times, once you've made that decision, the devil will come and he's going to tell you, see, you didn't make the right decision. You didn't go the right way. You didn't hear the voice of God. Look at what's happening. It's all bad. You need to go back. But that's where you take that stand and you tell that devil, I don't care what you have to say. I didn't ask for your opinion. I don't want to hear what you have to say about this situation. I believe I've heard the voice of God. If I have missed it, Jesus will redeem it because I'm going to keep turning my heart to him. And when you take that stand and you tell him no, the Bible says he has to leave. He has to flee. You know, we were talking about this morning when we bought our first house. We're originally from Greenville, South Carolina. We bought our first house. Tell them what happened.
Well, we saw this house and we felt like God said that that was our house. And we heard a price to pay for that house. And so we went and we looked at the house and we made the offer. And they said it was too little and they refused our offer. And we had a realtor friend and we talked to him about it and he said, oh, there's no way will you ever get that house for that price. But we said, God told us that was the price to pay for that house. And so we just stood and we waited and we waited and we waited. And we drove by this house every day on our way back and forth to work that we did at that time. And so every day we went by and we watched and we looked. And the house was still for sale. It was still for sale. And we just said, God, if that's our house, we're going to trust you. We're going to trust you that that's our house. And we just kept believing, and we never felt that it was not our house to let go of that house or anything. We just felt, yes, God, you told us that's our house. And so I think we even called them back and tried to make another offer to see if they, still would receive us. No. They would not take it. Everything. Well, 6 months went by, and all of a sudden Greg gets a phone call, and they said, are you still interested in this house? And he said, yes, we are. And they said, do you still want it for that same price? And we said, yes, that's the price that we want to pay for. They said, well, we'll sell it to you then if you want it for that same price. And see, God had put it in our hearts. That was our house. That was the price. And we didn't have to change anything. They came back to us because that was what God had said. And it was what God said. And we just chose to stand and believe him and trust him. And it was 6 months that went by. And we didn't have to do anything except just believe him and trust him. And he brought it forth.
That's right. And really that taught us a lot. We learned a lot through that. And we go back to that many times as an anchor of our soul of what it means to hear the voice of God. Because we didn't care about a house.
No,
at that point, we were fine with where we were. We weren't looking for a house. And it's like God just dropped it in our heart. He gave us that choice. God was saying, that's our house, and we had a choice to make. Were we going to believe what God said or not? And when we made that offer, it's like it didn't make sense to our minds, but we had really prayed, and that's key. When we made that choice to do what we believe God said, we went back to him and we let God show us every step of the way how to go through that. We asked him, Jesus, what do you want us to pay for this house? And he knew how much that house needed to be paid for. So he showed us each step. He showed us what to do, when to do it, and he walked us through it took us by the hand and led us step by step through that situation. And again, we learned so much through that. I mean, it was where we didn't care if we ever got the house. The house wasn't an issue to us. No. We were just going to obey God. And it looked like the door was shut. And we just said, okay, God, we trust you. And we went on with our lives, obeying Jesus. And then it came back around to us because God was teaching us something. And we bought that house, and we lived in that house for 10 years. Now, here's the next important part about that. Because we knew God said that's your house. God said this is what you're going to pay for it. God told us which mortgage company to use because, again, we prayed and we asked him. And God told us. And so every single month for 10 years. That's 120 months. God paid that mortgage. We never missed a mortgage. We weren't late. God did it, because we could always go back when the finances seemed tight. We could always go back and say, but God said,
That's right.
God gave us this house. And every time God came through.
It seemed impossible, but he came
It
through
really did. I
every
mean,
time.
we were very young back then. I believe we were like 27 and 31, and it was impossible to young people back then. But God made a way. He knew what we needed. He knew what was coming down the road. While we lived there, our daughter was born. God had a place for her. You know, God loves us. He's a loving God. He really does care about the details of your life. But it's we have to, when that choice comes, we just have to listen to what he's saying and obey, because the devil's always going to come with the opposite. You know, God says it's this way, and the devil's going to come and say, well, but what about this? I mean, go back to Genesis chapter 3, where the serpent came to Eve, and he said, can't you eat of anything? And Eve told him, no, God said we're not to eat of this tree, not even to touch it. But that serpent said, God knows that if you do that, you're going to be wise. You're going to know the difference between good and evil, and you're going to be like him. There's nothing wrong with it. That choice came to her, and she made the wrong choice. Now, to Eve, at the time, I'm sure it probably seemed like a small decision. It's just fruit. I'm just going to eat a piece of fruit. What difference does it make? But that one simple decision, or what seemed like a simple decision, set on course our lives today, for humanity, from the beginning to the end. It set it on course, that one decision. And then when she went to her husband Adam and gave it to him, it says he ate. He had that choice. And he made that same choice to do the wrong thing, to do the opposite of what God had told him. They listened to the devil and they were deceived, but it was their choice. That's what made it so serious. They willfully chose to go the wrong way after God had told them the right choice to make. Now, don't throw any stones at Adam and Eve, because we've all done that very same thing. God says go this way, and we say, no, I'm going this way. We've both had examples of that in our lives, you know, where I know when I went to college, looking back, I know it was not the will of God for me to go to college at that time. And I did it anyway. And it brought great destruction to my life. I mean, I chose relationships. I chose the path for my life. And it brought a lot of destruction. It brought a lot of hurts. It brought a lot of wounds. And it almost cost me my life. And but it brought me to my knees, to where I realized I've made wrong choices. And God, I need you to change me and to fix me, because I'm a mess because of my choices. And until I came to that point, until I came to that realization that it was my choices that got me there, and it was my choice to turn back to God that was the only way to come out of it, I didn't change. But once I made that choice and I just surrendered my heart to God and I said, God, please help me. I need help. My life instantly began to change. It was that fast. But I didn't have to go down that path. It didn't have to be that way. That was not the happy path that God intended for me. God, in his love and his mercy, picked me off of that wrong path and put me back on the happy path. But it was really close. It could have cost me everything. You know, and those kind of decisions, every single one of us are going to face and have faced at some point in our lives. And I'm sure that we have more ahead of us. But it's just every time choosing, settling down on the inside of us. Jesus, what choice do you want me to make here? You know, like you were telling me about the choice that you made as a young person, you know.
Yes. I chose the wrong choice. I was 19 years old, and I was in a relationship, and my parents didn't approve. His parents were my pastors at the time, and they didn't approve. Everyone I knew, they did not approve, and I was determined to get married at that time. And I did. I got married, and it was terrible for me for 5 years. It was just a horrible situation, and it was really just a horrible situation. And God brought me out in his love and his mercy. He delivered me out of that. And if I had not gotten out of that, I would not be here. I know I would have been dead. But it was my stubbornness and my terrible, strong will that made that wrong decision, because everybody told me, don't do it. Don't do it. But I chose. And I could have chosen to make the right decision and said no. But I went down that wrong path. But God, in His love and His mercy, brought me out. And like Greg said, it's His love, His mercy, and making that right choice to come out, and repentance and God's deliverance to change my life now and restore me, and has brought me so that it's hard for me to tell about it now, because He's so delivered me out of that I don't remember it now. He's erased that out of my life and brought me out, and now I have a wonderful relationship here. And we've been married 30 years now. And so it's hard for me to go back that far into something. But He can totally restore you when you've made a terrible decision. You repent, and God will bring you out. And He can and bring restoration and deliverance and just totally change you. And that's what's the good part.
He can really make it as if it never happened. I've never experienced anything quite like that, to where it's not, I don't ever think about it. It's not real in me. It never comes up. It never comes up in her. It is as if those 5 years were erased from her life. But that's the supernatural miracle working power of God, who, even though, like she said, she made the wrong decision, when she turned to God, when she made the right choice, God took her, put her back on that happy path, and erased where she had been on that wrong path, as if it never happened.
That's right.
That's the love of God. That's the forgiveness of God. And that's not anything special about her. God has that for every single one of us.
He'll do it for
every
anyone.
one of us. And He does truly have a happy path, because God gives us life. From the moment we're conceived, He has given us life, and He has a path for us to take, and He wants to help us make the right choices. And even Jesus, because God sent Jesus to the earth to show us how to live and how to make those right choices. But the key was, He always went to His Father God to make those choices. You know the story in Luke chapter 2 where Jesus, when He was 12 years old, He and His parents went up to the temple like they always do. And then when they started back, His parents realized Jesus wasn't with them, and they went searching for Him, searched for 3 days for Him, finally found Him in the temple. And when they found Him, they said, what are you doing here? We've been looking all over for you. He said, how is it that you had to look for me? Didn't you know that I had to be about my Father's business? He made a choice, even at 12 years old, that he was going to serve God. He was going to fulfill the call of God on his life. And you can see that was even fruit of his decisions, his choices, even up until that point. And it says that Jesus went home with them from there, and he was habitually obedient to them. That's a choice. We've all heard about the New Year's resolutions and people choosing, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to stop this, or I'm going to do this. And it lasts a day, a week, a month, maybe a year. And then you end up falling back into the very thing that you say, I'm not going to do that. Well, that's because you didn't make that decision letting Jesus help you. If God's really wanting you to make that decision, you got to take that next step, and you got to let God do it through you. Just like we did in our relationships, those wrong choices that we made. When she came to her knees, I came to my knees, and we realized this is the wrong decision. This is not the way we're supposed to go. We acknowledged the fact that we made wrong decisions. It was what was wrong in our heart. It wasn't our parents' fault. It wasn't God's fault. It wasn't the other people in the relationship. It wasn't their fault. It was our fault. When we came to that point and we acknowledged that and we say, God, it's us. Please forgive us and please help us and have mercy on us. He did. And he can restore and redo that. But Jesus made those right choices in his life. And his key was in John chapter 5, verse 30. We always go back to this because it's a guiding principle. And if Jesus lived this way, he wants us to live this way because he set the example. He was our example in how you live here on this earth. He lived here on this earth making the same choices, the same decisions that we're faced with. But he did it because he turned to God. And if you look in John 5:30, it says Jesus is saying this to his people. I am able to do nothing from myself. Independently of my own accord. In other words, it's not my choice. I'm not doing this apart from just me on my own. He said, but only as I am taught by God. That voice coming to him. And as I get his orders. So God was telling him, this is the choice. This is the way to go. This is the decision you need to make. He said, even as I hear those orders, I judge. I decide as I'm bidden to decide. That's the key. He made that choice because God told him what choice to make. Therefore, he always stayed on that happy path. And you can think, well, people hated Jesus. His own people hated Jesus. Even his own family tried to get him to come out of the house one day when he was preaching and turn his back. But you know what? Jesus always made that right choice. Doesn't mean that happy path is always going to be easy, because Jesus also said that the right way is narrow, it's contracted by pressure, but it is the right path. And as long as you stay on that, the end's going to be heaven. The end's going to be that relationship with God that he's always wanted with us. That's the end. But there's going to be some trials and tribulations along the way. But Jesus chose that. He knew. He knew he was destined for the cross. He knew that was a decision he had to make. And it goes on to say, he said, and my judgment is right, is just, and it's righteous, because I don't seek or consult my own will. He set aside anything that he might have wanted. He said, I have no desire to do what is pleasing to myself. That is the work of the Spirit of God on the inside of him every day leading up to that point. And that's why I was saying in the beginning, even the smallest decisions, what am I going to wear today? What am I going to eat today? Those small decisions are what affects us. And every time, it may not seem like a big thing to you. Well, who care? God doesn't care what I eat for breakfast. He does, because he wants a relationship with you. And every time you choose, you make that choice to go to him and say, God, what do you want me to eat for breakfast this morning? And you listen to his voice and you obey. That builds that relationship with him even more. And you build on that during your day with, what do I wear? What do I eat? What do I do at work now? Who do I talk to? Which way do I drive to work? Which way do I drive home? Every point, developing that relationship with him. That's what it's all about. It's not about whether you eat at McDonald's or not, or you eat at KFC, or you go down Railroad Avenue to work. It's about your relationship with God. And did you hear his voice and obey him? That's how it works. And he said, I have no desire to do what is pleasing to myself, my own aim, my own purpose, but only the will and the pleasure of the Father who sent me. And in Philippians 2, God tells us, he said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. But in the next verse, I love the next verse, he goes on to say through the Apostle Paul, he said, but not in your own strength, because it's God who is all the while at work on the inside of you, creating where it may not have been there. Maybe that desire wasn't there, but he will create in you that desire to do his will, to go down his happy path, and energizing, giving you the ability, the power, the strength, whatever you need to do that. So not only does he tell us what choice to make, he gives us the power, he gives us the desire to do it. It's so simple. And we consider and say, yes, it's so simple, but when you're faced with the choice, what do I eat? What do I wear? Or even more, what car do I buy? Or what decision do I make about my health? Whatever it is, no matter how small, how big, God always has the right choice for you. If you will stop, do what Jesus did. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus went there and he laid on his face and he prayed and he cried out to God. Why? Because he wanted to make the right choice. He knew the cross was in front of him. He wanted to make the right choice. And we all have crosses that come up in our lives every day. All we have to do is ask God, and he will give us the right choice and help us to follow that choice on that happy path. So we hope this meant a lot to you. It meant a lot to us. We're grateful you were listening today. We encourage you to come back. We're on WCAB every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:30. You can also go to our website, thewordoffaithfellowship.org, and see all of our radio programs there, and you can watch them whenever you want. So we love you, and we're praying you have a good day and make right choices today.